There comes a moment when a man is stripped of everything, the noise fades, the crowd disappears, the applause stops, and all that remains is silence. It's in that moment when he has no one to turn to, no hand to hold, no answer in sight, that the world calls it defeat. But heaven calls it the beginning, because when a man has no one but God, he steps into a realm few ever enter the sacred silence where power is born. Not from strength, but from surrender. This is not the end of your story. This is the moment you learn who you really are, not in comfort, not in applause, but in the stillness where only God is enough. Welcome to the wilderness. Welcome to the fire. Welcome to the transformation. There is a kind of silence, unlike any loneliness you've ever known. It comes after you've tried everything, prayed, begged, held on, cried out, and still everything slips away. Loved ones walk out. Opportunities vanish. It feels like the world has moved on without you, leaving you alone in a dimly lit room with nothing but your own breath and an unbearable stillness to those who've never been here. It looks like defeat, but Napoleon Hill had another word for it. He called it a moment of revelation, the point where your mind stops depending on the world around you and starts seeking answers from within. Hill once wrote, "When defeat overtakes a man, the easiest and most logical thing to do is to quit. That is exactly what the majority of men do. But you are not the majority. You are not like the rest in think and grow rich." Hill wasn't just talking about money. He was talking about inner rebirth, and ironically, that rebirth doesn't begin in success. It begins when you have absolutely nothing left. Look at history. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, not because he was weak, but because God was stripping away the excess to prepare him to lead a nation. Nelson Mandela wasn't forged in luxury. He was shaped in a cell with nothing but silence and a deep, unshakable conviction. And you, wherever you are right now in your pain, confusion, or exhaustion, what if you're exactly where you need to be? What if you're not falling behind, but being positioned? Picture this. A man loses everything in a crisis. His family leaves, his business collapses. He stands in an empty apartment with nothing but a chair and a flickering light bulb. No emails, no calls, no one to impress, and for the first time in years, he notices the silence, not as something scary, but something sacred. And from somewhere deep inside, he hears a whisper, "I'm still here. You're not finished. And maybe this is not the end." That's not logic. That's the beginning of faith. What Hill called the sixth sense, that invisible nudge, that intuitive voice starts to awaken not in noise, but in stillness. So when you've got no one left to call, no job to cling to, no applause, no validation, what you're left with is you and a force you once thought was only philosophical, the guidance of the unseen. That's when the real conversation begins. And maybe, just maybe, you'll hear this. You haven't been abandoned. You've been called back, not back to your past, but back to your soul's original assignment, where nothing needs to be proved, nothing needs to be earned, just presence. If you're standing in that silence right now, don't rush out of it. Don't numb it with noise, scrolling, or distractions. Stay there, because this just might be the first time in your life you're finally hearing the one who made you. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. The world sees isolation as punishment, but heaven often sees it as preparation. The wilderness is not a prison. It's a workshop. It's the place where the man you were dies and the man you were meant to be begins to rise. In the Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill writes, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. But here's the part most people miss. That seed rarely grows in the spotlight. It grows in the dark, in the wilderness, in the places no one sees. Wilderness is God's classroom. It's where He teaches the unteachable, reveals the invisible, and rebuilds the man from the inside out. Look at history. Abraham left everything familiar to follow a voice he couldn't see. Joseph was sold, betrayed, imprisoned, left to rot in a foreign land before the dream God gave him came true. David, the shepherd boy, turned king, spent years hiding in caves, running for his life, learning to trust not in his strength, but in God's. None of them were promoted in comfort. They were forged in wilderness. And this is exactly what Hill meant when he said, one of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Because what looks like defeat may just be divine development in disguise. Think of it like this. The wilderness strips away everything that doesn't belong to your calling. It removes what's unnecessary pride, people-pleasing, shallow support systems. The illusion of control, it doesn't destroy you, it distills you. Imagine a man named Mark. He once ran a 7-figure business, had hundreds of people under him, his name on magazine covers. Then came betrayal. Then a market crash. Then silence. No phone calls. No cameras. No meetings. Just the sound of his own breath in a 1-bedroom apartment he never thought he'd live in. But in that wilderness, Mark wrote the first words of a book that would change thousands of lives, not because he was trying to be successful, but because he was finally real. That's what the wilderness does. It removes performance and restores purpose. The fire doesn't burn. It burns away what's not you. The wilderness feels like everything's falling apart. But in truth, God is rebuilding the foundation, so what's coming won't collapse. Hill said, before success comes in any man's life, he is sure to meet with much temporary defeat, and perhaps some failure. Not maybe, sure, too. Why? Because success without preparation breeds ego, and ego can't carry purpose. So if you're in a wilderness season right now, if people have left you, if the doors won't open, if everything seems silent, don't panic. This isn't rejection. It's refinement. This isn't abandonment. It's alignment. The wilderness is not where you are punished, it's where you are positioned. What you learn in the wilderness 1. Stillness. You stop running and finally start listening. 2. Trust. Not in outcomes, but in the one who knows the outcome. 3. Purpose. you begin to realize that success isn't what you thought it was. It's deeper, simpler, and keener. 4. Identity. Without applause or title, you discover who you truly are and who you're not. Napoleon Hill taught that faith is the head chemist of the mind. But you don't develop that kind of faith in luxury. You develop it when your back is against the wall, when your prayers feel unanswered, when your friends go quiet, when all you have left is one question: God, why am I here? And even if the answer doesn't come with words, it begins with awareness that you're not being buried. You're being planted. Closing thought, a gift in disguise. One day, you'll look back at this season, not with shame, not with fear, but with gratitude, because it was in the wilderness that you lost what didn't matter and found what truly did. You stopped performing and started becoming. You stopped seeking approval and started walking in assignment. And when you rise from this place, you'll rise different. You'll rise deeper. You'll rise unshakable, because now you know the wilderness wasn't the end. It was the workshop, and you were never alone in it. There is a kind of silence that doesn't just feel empty, it feels cruel. You pray and hear nothing. You reach out and no one answers. You show up for everyone, but when you need someone, no one shows up for you. And in that silence, the enemy whispers, "See, you're alone. You're forgotten. You don't matter." But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. Heaven does some of its loudest work in complete silence. Napoleon Hill spoke of a power greater than logic, infinite intelligence. He called it a force that answers not when you shout, but when you surrender. He never claimed the path to success would be easy. He said it would be painful, quiet, invisible, until one day it isn't. The silence you're in right now, it's not absence. It's alignment. God isn't ignoring you. He's silencing everything else so you can finally hear him. But let's be honest, that silence, it doesn't feel holy at first. It feels brutal, like standing in a room and screaming your soul out, only to hear your own echo bounce back, reminding you that no one's coming. But even echoes have purpose. They reveal you still have a voice, even if it's shaking. That voice, however faint, is what Napoleon Hill referred to as the other self, somewhere in your makeup. He wrote, "There lies sleeping the seed of achievement, which, if aroused and put into action, would carry you to heights such as you may never have hoped to attain. But that seed doesn't sprout in applause. It sprouts in silence, in darkness, in surrender." Take Sarah, for example. She thought she had it all: a stable marriage, 2 kids, a beautiful home, until one morning, her husband left. No warning, no closure, just silence. The first few weeks were chaos. Then came something worse: stillness, no texts, no voice on the other end of the phone, just the sound of her own breath and the ache of wondering why. But instead of running from that silence, Sarah did something she hadn't done in years. She listened, and in that stillness, she started to write, not for a book, not for anyone else, but just to survive. She wrote her pain, her confusion, her anger at God, her loneliness, and slowly, line by line, that journal became a conversation not with the world, but with heaven. Today, Sarah runs a blog that reaches thousands of women navigating loss, heartbreak, and rebuilding. But it didn't begin in victory. It began in a silent apartment with nothing but God and a pen. God's silence is never without strategy. He was silent while Joseph sat in prison until Pharaoh had a dream no one else could interpret. He was silent while David hid in caves until Israel was ready for a king shaped by sorrow. He was silent when Jesus knelt in Gethsemane until resurrection shook the very earth. Heaven is not late. It's just moving on a higher timeline. That's why you must not curse the silence. Don't rush out of it. Don't drown it with scrolling, noise, or false distractions. Let it do its holy work, because somewhere in that stillness, you will hear the whisper, you are not behind. You are being positioned. You are not disqualified. You are being refined. You are not alone. You are being drawn deeper. Napoleon Hill said, "The moment you commit and quit holding back, all sorts of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance will rise up to help you, but those unseen forces, they don't arrive while you're yelling. They arrive when your soul has been quieted enough to see them coming." Closing thought, the sound within. The silence you feel right now. It might not be punishment. It might be a sacred womb pregnant with purpose. A space where God is not testing you, but training you to hear differently. Because when the world gets loud again, and it will, you will not be shaken by it. You will be the calm. You will be the stillness. You will carry peace like a weapon, because you learn to hear God's voice in the absence of all others. And when they ask you, "How did you get through that?" you'll smile and say, "I stopped cursing the silence and started listening for God in it." Anyone can believe when life is easy, when the paycheck clears, the relationship is healthy, and the future looks clear. Faith comes cheap, but real faith, the kind that moves mountains, the kind that carries you through hell and still stands firm, that kind of faith is not found in comfort. It's forged in fire. Napoleon Hill placed faith at the center of his philosophy. He said faith is the head chemist of the mind. It is the spiritual element that transforms thoughts into power. But Hill also warned, faith is not something you acquire in a moment of joy. It is built decision by decision in the trenches of adversity. The fire is not meant to destroy your faith. It's meant to purify it, to remove every false belief, every shallow conviction, every half-hearted intention that was never meant to last. When everything you trusted crumbles, and you choose to believe anyway, that's not blind optimism. That's fire-tested belief. Take Marcus. For example, he was an ambitious architect, ready to open his own firm. Then, right before launch, the investor pulled out, the economy tanked, and his entire plan collapsed. Months passed. He couldn't find clients. Savings dried up. He stopped praying because he didn't believe it mattered anymore. But one night, sitting in a half-empty diner with nothing but a notebook and coffee gone cold, he wrote a single line, "God, I don't know where you are, but I'll keep showing up until I find out." That sentence, that act of quiet defiance, became the foundation of a new version of him. Not the version who relied on talent or timing, but the one who walked by faith. Even in fog, 3 years later, Marcus built his firm not bigger, but stronger, not faster, but truer. And when asked what changed, he didn't say strategy. He said, I stopped needing evidence to believe. This is what Hill meant when he wrote, faith is the element, the chemical, which, when mixed with prayer, gives one direct communication with infinite intelligence. And the mixing doesn't happen in sunlight. It happens when the heat turns up, when the prayers feel empty, when the doors don't open, when you feel like giving up, but something inside whispers, not yet. Real faith is not loud. It's not always confident. Sometimes it's one quiet breath, God. I trust you, even here. It's not forged in perfection, but in pressure. It's the faith that says, I don't see the way, but I'm still walking. I don't feel strong, but I'm still standing. I don't hear anything, but I still believe you're near. You want a purpose that lasts. You want success that doesn't destroy you. Then let your faith be tested. Let the fire come, not to punish you, but to refine you. Because fire doesn't just burn. It reveals what can't be burned. Closing thought, what survives the fire. When you walk through fire with faith, you come out carrying something more than success. You come out carrying substance. The world is full of noise, hustle, shortcuts, image. But the world is starving for men and women whose faith has been forged in places no one applauded, in moments no one saw, in battles they fought alone. And if that's where you are now, good, because when the fire is over, you won't just have survived. You'll be the kind of person who carries peace into pressure, conviction into chaos, and light into dark places. Not because you were fearless, but because your faith survived the flames. And now you are unshakable. There's a moment. And maybe you've been there when everything falls away. The job, the relationship, the certainty, even the strength to keep pretending you're okay. And in that moment, you're not just empty. You're exposed. You thought you needed people. You thought you needed status. You thought you needed control. But now, with nothing left to hold on to, you look up, not because you're spiritual, but because you're out of options. Napoleon Hill called this place a turning point. He believed that most people never truly succeed because they never fully let go of the illusion that they are in control. But when you lose everything, you finally lose that illusion. And in the ashes, you find what was there all along, a source that never depended on your effort to begin with. When a man realizes that infinite intelligence is not something he must earn, but something he must connect with, Hill believed he becomes unstoppable. But connection doesn't come through striving, it comes through surrender. Take Elena. For example, she was a high-performing attorney, the type who had everything together, until her mom was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. Courtrooms turned to hospital rooms. Deadlines turned to life decisions. And the woman who once had all the answers had none. She prayed for healing. She begged for a miracle. But her mother died. And Elena shattered. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. She stopped going to church, stopped talking to friends, and eventually stopped showing up to life until one afternoon she walked into an empty chapel just to get away from the noise. She didn't say anything, didn't pray, just sat in silence. And in that silence, not thunder, not a sign, just one realization. if God is all I have, maybe that's not nothing. Maybe that's enough. That day didn't fix everything, but it reoriented everything. Because now she wasn't chasing peace. She was learning to receive it. This is what Hill called alignment with purpose. Not chasing success to feel secure, but allowing faith to define security itself. We live in a culture that tells you you're one achievement away from happiness, one person away from fulfillment, one breakthrough away from peace. But the truth, none of those things are guarantees. They're variables, and when the variables vanish, the only thing left is the constant God. And you begin to see you were never abandoned. You were being redirected. You were never broken. You were being rebuilt on something eternal. Hill wrote, "Success comes not to those who avoid pain, but to those who use pain as fuel to trust what they cannot see. That trust, that inner knowing, is not built through control. It's built through collapse, through letting go of every false foundation until all that's left is truth." Closing thought, finding enough. One day, you'll look back on this season not as failure, but as the foundation, not as the death of a dream, but the birth of vision, because you'll know what most people never discover, that when God was all you had, you weren't left with nothing. You were finally holding everything that matters. Not success, not applause, not answers, but peace, clarity, and a presence that never leaves. And from that place, you'll rise differently. You'll build differently. You'll walk into rooms not needing anything because you've already found everything. And that is the moment when purpose truly begins. It's easy to believe a chapter is the end when you're still inside it, especially when everything feels broken. But what if what looks like ruin is really construction? What if what feels like silence is really sacred strategy? What if this season you're in the one full of tears, tension, and waiting is not the end of your story, but the exact moment your testimony is being written? Napoleon Hill said, "Every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success." But that seed doesn't bloom on the mountaintop. It grows in the dirt, the dark, cold, uncertain dirt where no one's watching. What most people call burial, God calls planting. You see, God doesn't need everything to be perfect to begin. He doesn't need applause. He doesn't wait for you to feel ready. He begins right in the middle of your mess. And if you're honest, this season has felt like a mess. You've lost things. You've lost people. Maybe you've even lost parts of yourself. But don't mistake brokenness for disqualification. Brokenness is often the only place God can begin building something unshakable. Take Julian, for example. He was in his late 30s, divorced, depressed, a failed business behind him, and a string of personal regrets in his rearview mirror. He thought the world had already written him off. And truth be told, so had he. Then, one night, after scrolling through motivational videos that only made him feel worse, he wrote 6 words in his journal: "Maybe this isn't how it ends." He didn't believe it yet, but he wanted to. So he started showing up to the gym, to therapy, to prayer. Slow, messy, inconsistent, but he kept going. And something strange happened. He stopped needing instant clarity and started embracing daily courage. Today, Julian mentors young entrepreneurs, not because he's the most successful, but because he's been through the fire and came out cleaner. Not just stronger. People don't follow him because he wins. They follow him because he's real. That's what happens when you stop hiding your wilderness and start speaking from it. Your pain becomes your platform. Your scars become your sentences. And your struggle becomes someone else's survival guide. Napoleon Hill didn't write Think and Grow Rich from a place of easy victory. He wrote it after losing his mother, struggling through bankruptcy, and being rejected by over 50 publishers. But it was in that invisible place, the valley between dreams and results, that he became a man worthy of being heard, and so will you. The world doesn't need more polished perfection. It needs men and women who've been through something real and have the quiet authority to speak life because they lived it. You don't get that in success. You get that in fire, in loss, in nights no one saw. So if you're in that place right now, on your knees, in silence, holding only your breath and a shred of faith, don't ask, how do I get out? Ask, what is being built in me here that couldn't have been built anywhere else? Because something unshakable is forming. And when the time is right, you'll rise. Not with noise, not with hype, but with authority. Closing thought, the final word isn't failure. This isn't the end of your story. This is the chapter that changes everything. Stay faithful. Stay humble. Stay available. Because God is not done. He is still writing, even when all you see are broken lines. And when you stand on the other side of this season, you'll carry a strength that doesn't shout. You'll carry a peace that doesn't waver. You'll walk into rooms and people will feel it. This person has been through fire and didn't burn. Because when a man has no one but God, he learns that God was more than enough all along. And that man cannot be shaken. If you're still listening, it means something here. Spoke to your soul. Not just your mind, but something deeper. Something that knows this isn't the end. That you're not broken. You're being rebuilt. That you're not alone. You're being prepared. So breathe. Let it settle. Let it transform you in the quiet. And when you're ready, take one small step, one act of courage, one choice to keep going, because the fire you're walking through is not destroying you. It's forging something unshakable. If this message found you at the right time, subscribe to Think Rich Mindset Hub and stay connected to the journey. Leave a comment and share your moment. Someone else may need to know they're not alone either. Until next time, keep the faith, trust the silence, and walk with fire.